It's quite a hard act to come up and talk following those two excellent presentations, particularly Bill. I think you should get the Filling for England award for... I've had actually several issues when I've done presentations in the past where I've had no... the technology's just died on me. I think that was a masterful attempt at keeping us entertained with no visual aids. It seemed like a really good idea when my boss suggested that we nominate our project for this award. And then I got here today and I sat in this room and I thought, oh my God, I've got to talk to all these people about my project. And actually I normally talk to a room full of sometimes angry farmers. So he assured me that you would be a kinder audience. So I hope that's true. So my project's focusing on birds. It's a Farmland bird project. It started life in 2009 when I was employed by the Cranbourne Chase AONB, and it was part of a wider Natural England partnership initiative, the South West Farmland Bird Initiative, or SWIFTBI as we called it. And it was quite an interesting project in that it was delivered in 4 different locations by 4 different partners. So we had Cotswolds were led by Natural England, the North Wessex Downs project was led by the RSPB, my project was AONB led, and the Dorset project was led by FWAG. The aims of each project were exactly the same, but delivered in slightly different ways. So although it's called the South West Farmland Bird Project, it sort of does focus on it doesn't sort of go into Devon and Cornwall. And the reasons for that are it focuses on 6 farmland bird species. And those farmland bird species are concentrated across the country. And because we are very lucky to have excellent bird records through the efforts of the RSPB and the British Trust for Ornithology, we have very good knowledge of where particular bird species exist. And if you look at the map, the red dots indicate the birds that my project focuses on and their concentrations in terms of their population. Just for interest, the yellow dots are grassland birds and the blue dots are specialist species. So down in Cornwall you've got the chough right at the end, South Devon you've got the Searle bunting, and in the Wessex heartland and the Brecks you've got stone curlew, and in the north you've got the twite. So Natural England had this very good base of bird records on which to base their project. So why farmland birds? Well, I'm sure most of you are aware that farmland birds have declined significantly in the 40 or so years that they've been recorded, and it was actually the Labour government, it was a public service agreement that they would increase the numbers of farmland birds, and that's been carried on through successive governments. So focusing on my project, the red line is the AONB boundary. The green area is the Farmland Bird Project area. That was how it started out in 2009. When FWAG temporarily met its demise, we took up the slack and covered the Dorset part of the AONB as well, and that's the area that we continue to cover today. So we cover the whole of the AONB as well as to the east of Salisbury. So this is the graph that a lot of you are familiar with. The blue line is the farmland bird populations, and the farmland bird index is the number of 12 farmland bird species. That is birds that need to spend their time, part of their life cycle, on farmland. But if you break that, it's 19 species actually. If you break that 19 species down, you have the specialist species, things like grey partridge and lapwing, and you have generalist species, things like wood pigeon. And it's the specialist species that are dragging the index down, and despite 20 or so years of agri-environment schemes, this line is continuing to go in the wrong direction. So Natural England were looking for a way to resolve that. If you break down agri-environment data over the last 20 years, there's lots of hedgerow restoration, there's lots of grass margins, there's lots of chalk downland management. What you don't have is the things that the birds need, things that involve quite a lot more effort, sowing a seed crop for example, or leaving an area of arable land fallow for a bird like lapwing to nest in. So looking at lots of research, Natural England came up with this package of options using higher level stewardship, because when they talk to farmers who, let's face it, have had a lot of flack about farmland birds and their numbers declining, farmers said to Natural England, tell us what you want. Tell us what you want us to do and we will do it. So we came up with this package of options to fit the requirements of these 6 species of birds which form the cornerstone of the South Wiltshire Farmland Bird Project and the wider initiative. And these are birds that exist on arable land. They need cultivated land to survive, either through part or all of their life cycle. My personal favourite at the moment is turtle dove, and these are the declines since 1970. Got grey partridge, the iconic game bird, tree sparrow. Tree sparrow is quite interesting actually, because although it's 91% decline since 1970, if you look at the records from 2011 onwards, they've actually had an upsurge in numbers of 100%. That's 100% from a 90% decline, by the way. But and we hope that in some part that is in part to the projects that have made up the South West Farmland Bird Initiative. We've got corn bunting, yellow wagtail and lapwing. So this package of options that Natural England came up with is scientifically based. It's based on a lot of work done by the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, the RSPB, the British Trust for Ornithology. And the idea is that we would go to farmers with this want, with this ask, and ask them to deliver it for us, because we know from the scientific research that if you provide enough of the bird's year-round requirements, then the bird number should increase. If you break it down out into 100 hectares square, this is what we're asking farmers to do on their arable land. It's to provide a 2-hectare area for ground nesting birds like lapwing to nest, where those birds exist. It's to provide 2 to 3 hectares of flower-rich habitat, so either sown flower-rich margins or areas like this, which is a conservation headland where the farmer has sowed a cereal crop across the whole field, but he's left the outside edge unsprayed and unfertilised, and you get this wonderful display of things like poppy and cornflower, which are really rich in insects. So we need 2 to 3 hectares, or 2 to 3% of insect-rich habitat. And finally, we need 2 hectares of seed-rich food, and that can be a sown wild bird seed mix, where you go out and sow the sort of bird seed that you would have in your bird feeder, or we have large areas of overwintered stubbles with lots of grain within them. So I'll just go back to the slide. I worked very closely with Natural England. I worked with independent consultants and agronomists and gamekeepers, and my job was to go out to farmers within the farmland bird area and persuade them to put 7% of their highly productive chalkland into farmland bird options. And when I came down from the Chiltern to do this job, I just thought, 7%? Who in their right mind is going to put 7% of their productive arable land? So we're not talking about the edge of the field for a grass margin, we're talking about the area in the middle, we're talking about their oilseed rape crop, we're talking about their wheat crop. I thought, it just can't be done, can it? But I was pleasantly surprised actually. The Wiltshire farmers and the Dorset farmers did really embrace the challenge, and I think where this project has succeeded is that I am able to work with Natural England and give very specific advice to farmers on how to manage these options. And the reason they've been so woefully undertaken in the past is because farmers don't want to allow weeds into the edge of their cereal crop. They don't want to leave an area in the middle of their 100-hectare field bare so a lapwing can nest in it. They're worried about weeds, they're worried about rotations. So I was able to bring in sort of agronomy expertise and work with them, and also balance interests with the shoot. A lot of these farms are shooting farms, with the farm manager, with the landowner, and get something that would work for the farm and the rotation and the business, but also work for the birds. And I think that's where the project has been successful, and also it's a very consistent message to give to farmers. This map shows the green blobs are where I've visited in my 5 years, 5.5, nearly 6 years of working on the project. So the light green is fewer visits, and the dark green are more visits. And what's been really great, actually, and the foundation of any successful project, is the relationships that we've made with farmers and landowners. I get farmers now texting me bird updates. I get emails saying, oh, you know, I've got some lapwing chicks, or I've seen some grey partridge. Can you come out and look at this? I want to know if it's good enough. And that is invaluable because it means forming those relationships within an OMB. You can then revisit those farms and maybe get them to do different types of projects. So that's been, it's been very rewarding for me, and it's been rewarding for the OMB as well. So these are some of the numbers. I've given one-to-one advice to 147 farms, which cover an area of 24,000 hectares of arable land. And that's generated 55 new higher level stewardship agreements. And most of this work has been funded through higher level stewardship, although there are farms out there doing it off their own back. We've created 1,000 hectares of new farmland bird habitat, so that's seed areas, wildflower strips, lapwing nesting areas. We've engaged with 645 people. One part of the project which I was really keen to do was talk to lots of members of the public and try and bring some positive PR to farming. And Cranbourne Chase is a very rural area, but not everyone realises why there might be a grass strip round a field, or why there's a big square area in the middle of a field with no crops in it. So they've been very popular. And we've done 6 events for farmers, taking them out to farms and showing them what we want them to do. And it's been very well received in the press. That picture there was actually, we had a slot on Countryfile a couple of years ago, which I have to say was the most stressful thing I've ever done in my life. It was, I mean, it's great publicity for the project, but it is very stressful. We've got videos on YouTube, and we've done lots of radio interviews. So it's been very good for the OMB, raising the profile of the OMB. In terms of funding, originally the project was funded by Natural England and the AONB, and then in 2010, when we realised that the funding was going to go in the wrong direction, my boss Dave Blake made an application to Wessex Water as part of their Biodiversity Partners programme, which funds projects in their catchment that are beneficial to biodiversity, and we successfully got £50,000, so £10,000 for 5 years, which has enabled me to stay to work full-time throughout the project. That has then led to money through a different Wessex Water funding strand, because they're building a big pipeline, water pipeline through the AONB, and we've secured £60,000 of funding through that as well. So now I'm actually solely funded by Wessex Water, along with the in-kind funding that allows me to have an office within the AONB. So we've gone from being completely publicly funded to privately funded, and I think that's a very good model for the future. We're also, I've been working with some farmers and some local people to increase the habitat for tree sparrows. We've got lots of boxes going up, and we've got volunteers checking them, which is great feedback for the farmers because they don't always have the time to go back and check them. And I'm working with Natural England and some local farmers to set up a turtle dove project around Martin Down National Nature Reserve, which is on the sort of Hampshire, Wiltshire, Dorset border, and that is the last kind of core population of turtle dove in sort of southern England. So we're doing some research onto where the birds are foraging, and also the disease levels of disease, because they do suffer from a disease which restricts their ability to feed. So those projects are carrying on. This is the pipeline that I was talking about. It runs from north, just by Poole, north to into Wiltshire, and then across to Salisbury. 61 kilometres of pipeline, and Wessex Water are paying me to work with affected landowners to do some farmland, not just farmland bird improvements, but biodiversity improvements across the pipeline. So I'm doing that along with the other work, because Wessex Water recognise that the relationships we've made with all these farmers, and they're obviously valuing that because they're funding us for £60,000. And actually, We're getting more funding from Wessex Water. The Farmland Bird project came to an end in March this year, and it's now developed into a wider conservation project looking at farmland biodiversity and working with large groups of farmers to do landscape scale biodiversity work and also improving soil and water quality. So Wessex Water funded us for another 5 years to work through a similar area, which is great for me because I didn't fancy being unemployed. I'd just like to thank everyone for listening and my boss for nominating me. Thank you.